Hey guys, tonight we begin with a story that would make your grandmother clutch her rosary beads and demand you change the channel. We're diving into the hidden world of medieval convents, where the brides of Christ were brewing more than just holy water, and their medicine cabinets would make a modern pharmacy blush. You probably imagine medieval nuns as pious, pure souls spending their days in silent prayer and embroidery. The reality? They were running what essentially amounted to medieval speakeasies and opium dens, all in the name of God. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world, especially when we're about to explore some of history's most unexpected party animals. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. Tonight's journey takes us behind convent walls where the line between sacred and intoxicated was blurrier than a drunk nun's vision after evening prayers. And let's ease into tonight's journey together, because trust me, you're going to need to sit down for this one. The Holy Brewmasters. You're standing outside the imposing stone walls of a Benedictine convent in 12th century France. And the first thing that hits you isn't the sound of chanting or prayer. It's the rich, yeasty smell of brewing beer wafting through the morning air. Welcome to medieval monastic life, where your daily spiritual routine includes not just morning prayers, but morning ales. Let's shatter your first misconception right here. Medieval nuns weren't just making beer for fun or rebellion. They were brewmasters by necessity, and damn good ones at that. In an age where water could literally kill you faster than a plague-ridden rat, alcoholic beverages weren't just preferred. They were essential for survival. The fermentation process killed the harmful bacteria that turned regular water into a medieval death sentence. You wake up at 4 a.m. as Sister Adelheid, a Cistercian nun in a German convent around 1250. Your day doesn't begin with coffee. That exotic bean won't reach Europe for another few centuries. Instead, you stumble through the cold stone corridors to the brewery, where yesterday's batch of cervisia awaits. This isn't the watery gruel you might imagine. This is a full-bodied 6 to 8% alcohol beer that would put most modern craft brews to shame. The brewing process in your convent is sophisticated beyond what most people realize. You're using a complex system of malting, mashing, and fermentation that requires genuine scientific knowledge. The brewhouse is one of the most important buildings in your religious complex. Right alongside the chapel and the scriptorium, your abbess doesn't just oversee spiritual matters. She's essentially running a medieval biotechnology operation. Your hands work methodically as you check the fermentation vats, each one containing enough alcohol to intoxicate a small village. The irony isn't lost on anyone. You've taken vows of temperance, yet you're producing enough booze to stock a tavern. But here's the thing. Temperance in medieval terms didn't mean abstinence. It meant moderation, and the church's definition of moderation was surprisingly generous. You consume your first beer of the day with breakfast around 6 a.m. This isn't binge drinking. This is hydration. Your daily ration typically includes 2 to 3 pints of beer, supplemented by wine during special occasions and feast days. By modern standards, you're maintaining a steady blood alcohol level throughout the day that would make you legally drunk in most countries. The brewing knowledge you possess is passed down through generations of nuns, a secret sisterhood of medieval fermentation experts. You know which grains produce the strongest alcohol, how long to let the hops steep for maximum potency, and the exact temperature needed to prevent spoilage. This isn't amateur hour. You're running what amounts to a professional brewery operation disguised as religious devotion. Your convent produces different types of beer for different occasions. There's the weak stuff for daily consumption, the stronger brews for feast days, and the premium batches reserved for visiting clergy and important guests. The quality of your beer becomes a source of pride for your religious community, and convents begin competing to produce the finest ales in the region. But brewing isn't just about alcohol content. It's about medicine. You're adding herbs, spices, and botanical ingredients that transform your beer into liquid pharmacy. Hops don't just preserve the beer. They act as a sedative and digestive aid. Juniper berries add antibacterial properties. Wormwood helps with stomach ailments. Every batch is carefully crafted to address specific health concerns of your religious community. The economic implications of your brewing operation are staggering. Your convent doesn't just produce beer for internal consumption. You're selling surplus to local taverns, villages, and traveling merchants. The profits from your alcoholic enterprises fund everything from manuscript copying to cathedral construction. In essence, the medieval church's expansion was partially financed by nun-produced alcohol. You finish your morning brewing duties as the sun rises higher, the stone walls of your convent warming under the early light. Your habits may be rough wool, but your breath carries the unmistakable aroma of fermented grain. You're not just a bride of Christ. You're a medieval alcohol entrepreneur, and business is booming. The opium gardens of God. You're kneeling in the herb garden of your convent at dawn. But the plants surrounding you aren't just for seasoning the evening soup. Your fingers work carefully through rows of poppies, their delicate petals hiding one of medieval Europe's most powerful drugs. Welcome to the monastery pharmacy, where the line between medicine and narcotics is as thin as a communion wafer. The garden you tend is divided into carefully planned sections: culinary herbs, medicinal plants, and what your abbess euphemistically calls special remedies. Those special remedies include opium poppies, cannabis plants, and a variety of psychoactive fungi that would make a modern agent break into a cold sweat. But you're not running a drug cartel. You're managing medieval Europe's most sophisticated pharmaceutical operation. Your knowledge of plant-based medicines rivals that of any university-trained physician, which isn't surprising since most physicians of your era learned their craft from monastery herbalists. You know exactly when to harvest poppy sap for maximum potency, how to dry cannabis leaves to preserve their medicinal properties, and which mushrooms will ease pain versus which ones will send someone on a spiritual journey they'll never forget. Let's follow you through a typical day of pharmaceutical preparation. After morning prayers, you head to the infirmary where Sister Matilda, your head herbalist, is preparing the day's medications. The scene looks deceptively peaceful. Nuns in white habits grinding herbs with mortar and pestle, the air thick with the scent of drying plants. But look closer at what they're actually preparing, and you'll realize this is medieval Europe's equivalent of a prescription drug lab. The opium preparation process is surprisingly sophisticated. You score the unripe poppy pods with a small knife, collecting the milky latex that seeps out. This raw opium is then processed into various forms. Dried chunks for smoking, liquid extracts for drinking, and powdered forms for mixing with wine. Your convent produces enough opium to supply several villages, all under the blessing of the church. Cannabis cultivation in your convent serves multiple purposes. The plants provide hemp fiber for clothing and rope, seeds for oil, and leaves for medicine. But you know the real value lies in the resinous buds that your sisters carefully harvest and prepare. These aren't just for pain relief. They're used to treat everything from epilepsy to difficult childbirth. And yes, occasionally for recreation disguised as spiritual contemplation. Your pharmaceutical arsenal extends beyond the obvious suspects. You cultivate belladonna for its anticholinergic properties, though you know too much will kill faster than poison. Ergot-infected rye provides powerful hallucinogens that some of your sisters claim enhance their mystical visions. Mandrake root, despite its reputation for dark magic, serves as an effective anesthetic for surgical procedures. The preparation room in your infirmary resembles a medieval chemistry lab. You have distillation equipment for creating concentrated plant extracts, scales for measuring precise dosages, and recipe books written in Latin that detail complex pharmaceutical formulations. These aren't simple folk remedies. They're sophisticated drug preparations that require genuine scientific knowledge. Your daily routine includes not just preparing these substances, but consuming them. The line between medicine and recreation becomes increasingly blurred when your arthritis medication happens to be opium, and your digestive aid contains enough cannabis to alter your consciousness. You tell yourself it's all for health purposes, but the euphoric effects aren't exactly unwelcome during long hours of prayer or manual labor. The economic value of your pharmaceutical operation rivals your brewing enterprise. Wealthy nobles pay premium prices for your monastery's pain relievers, sleep aids, and spiritual enhancement preparations. Your opium is sought after by surgeons across Europe, while your cannabis preparations are prescribed by physicians for dozens of different ailments. But here's where things get interesting from a social perspective. The church doesn't just tolerate this drug production. It actively encourages it. Caring for the sick is considered a holy duty, and if that care involves providing powerful narcotics, well, that's just effective medicine. The theological justification is ironclad. God provided these plants for human benefit, and refusing to use them would be ungrateful. You spend your afternoons in the scriptorium, carefully copying medical texts that detail the properties and uses of various psychoactive substances. These manuscripts become treasured resources, traded between monasteries and sold to wealthy collectors. Your convent becomes known not just for religious devotion, but for pharmaceutical expertise that attracts students from across Europe. The irony of your situation isn't lost on you. You've taken vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. Yet you're operating a drug manufacturing facility that generates enormous profits. You've committed to a life of spiritual purity while regularly consuming substances that alter your consciousness. But in medieval thinking, there's no contradiction. You're using God's gifts to heal His people. And if those gifts happen to be intoxicating, that's just divine providence. As evening approaches and you finish cataloging the day's pharmaceutical production, you take your evening dose of medicine, a tincture that contains enough opium to ease your chronic back pain and enough cannabis to ensure peaceful sleep. Tomorrow you'll wake up ready to tend God's garden once again, where the flowers of paradise grow alongside the herbs of euphoria. Wine, women, and the Word of God. You're descending into the wine cellars beneath your convent, and the first thing that strikes you is the sheer scale of the operation. These aren't modest storage areas for communion wine. These are vast underground chambers filled with hundreds of barrels, each containing wines that would make modern vintners weep with envy. Welcome to the medieval church's best-kept secret. Nuns produce some of Europe's finest wines, and they weren't shy about enjoying their own product. The stone steps beneath your feet are worn smooth by centuries of nuns carrying amphoras, barrels, and wine-soaked habits. The air down here is thick with the complex aromas of aging wine, notes of oak, fruit, and something that might charitably be called spiritual inspiration. Your torch flickers against the barrel-lined walls, illuminating labels written in careful Latin script that detail vintages dating back decades. Let's establish the scope of your wine operation. Your convent owns vineyards stretching across several hillsides, worked by a combination of nuns, lay sisters, and local peasants. You're not just growing grapes for sacramental purposes. You're operating a commercial winery that supplies half the region with its finest vintages. The profits from wine sales fund everything from new buildings to illuminated manuscripts, making your religious community one of the wealthiest institutions in the area. Your day begins at sunrise in the vineyards, where you work alongside your sisters in the careful cultivation of grapevines. This isn't casual gardening. You understand concepts like terroir, grape variety selection, and optimal harvest timing that won't be formally codified by secular viticulturists for centuries. Your knowledge has been passed down through generations of wine-making nuns, creating a tradition of excellence that rivals any professional winery. The harvest season transforms your convent into something resembling a medieval party. You and your sisters work from dawn to dusk picking grapes, your white habits stained purple with juice, your voices raised in songs that sound suspiciously like drinking ballads adapted for religious use. The atmosphere is festive, almost bacchanalian, though you prefer to think of it as celebrating God's bounty with appropriate enthusiasm. But here's where your wine operation gets particularly interesting. You're not just making table wine. Your cellars produce fortified wines with alcohol content reaching 20%, sweet dessert wines that could double as cough syrup, and specialty blends infused with herbs that add both flavor and psychoactive properties. Some of your wines are so potent, they're essentially liquid courage disguised as religious refreshment. Your daily wine consumption would shock modern sensibilities. Breakfast includes a cup of light wine mixed with water. Lunch features a stronger vintage paired with whatever meager food your vows of poverty allow. Dinner concludes with the good stuff. Aged wines that pack enough alcoholic punch to make evening prayers a decidedly more mystical experience. By conservative estimates, you're consuming the equivalent of a modern bottle of wine per day, every day. The theological justification for your wine consumption is both clever and convenient. Christ turned water into wine, making viticulture a holy profession. The Eucharist requires wine, making consumption a sacramental act. Jesus drank wine with his disciples, making social drinking a form of religious fellowship. With logic like this, refusing wine becomes almost heretical. Your winemaking process involves techniques that won't be formally documented by secular sources for centuries. You understand the importance of crushing grapes at specific temperatures, controlling fermentation through careful yeast management, and aging wines in different types of wood to achieve desired flavors. Your cellars contain experimental batches that explore the boundaries of what wine can become. Some of your specialty wines cross the line from beverage into medicine. You produce wines infused with opium for pain relief, cannabis-enhanced varieties for digestive issues, and herbal blends that serve as medieval antidepressants. These aren't just alcoholic beverages. They're sophisticated, pharmaceutical preparations that happen to taste significantly better than most medieval medicines. The social implications of your wine production extend beyond your convent walls. You host visiting clergy, noble families, and important merchants, and your wine service is legendary throughout the region. Diplomatic negotiations are conducted over your finest vintages. Marriage contracts are sealed with toasts using your premium reserves. Your wine doesn't just intoxicate. It lubricates the social and political machinery of medieval society. Your sisters develop individual specialties within the winemaking operation. Sister Agnes excels at producing sweet dessert wines. Sister Margareta creates the herb-infused medicinal varieties. Sister Beatrice manages the fortified wines that could strip paint from cathedral walls. Each nun brings her own expertise to the collective enterprise, creating a level of specialization that would impress modern wine professionals. The quality control process in your cellars involves extensive tasting, which provides convenient justification for regular wine consumption. You need to monitor each barrel's progress, test for proper aging, and ensure consistent quality across different batches. This professional responsibility requires sampling multiple wines throughout the day, a burden you bear with appropriate religious devotion. Your wine operation creates interesting intersections with secular society. Local nobles compete to purchase your finest vintages for important occasions. Merchant caravans alter their routes to pass through your region, specifically to acquire your wines. Your religious community becomes a destination for wine enthusiasts who don't realize they're essentially visiting medieval Europe's most successful female-run winery. As you make your evening rounds through the cellars, checking fermentation progress and sampling wines for quality assurance, you reflect on the unique position you occupy. You're a bride of Christ who spends her days in the pursuit of perfect intoxication. You've taken vows of simplicity while producing luxury goods that grace the tables of kings. But in the medieval mindset, there's no contradiction. You're using God's gifts to create liquid joy, and if that joy happens to be alcoholic, Well, that's just evidence of divine generosity. The high priestesses of herbal highs. You're grinding dried mushrooms in the monastery pharmacy at 3 a.m. And the powdery residue on your fingers contains enough psilocybin to send a horse on a spiritual journey. The irony isn't lost on you. You're preparing what modern society would classify as Schedule 1. Controlled substances while wearing the habit of a holy woman. But in medieval Europe, the line between religious ecstasy and pharmaceutical euphoria was painted in very broad strokes. Your knowledge of psychoactive plants rivals that of any modern ethnobotanist, except your education came from ancient texts, oral traditions, and centuries of careful experimentation by generations of drug-savvy nuns. The monastery library contains manuscripts detailing the properties of dozens of consciousness-altering substances, written in code that would puzzle modern scholars, but makes perfect sense to someone in your profession. Let's walk through your typical day of consciousness enhancement preparation. After morning prayers, which, let's be honest, are considerably more mystical when you're maintaining a steady level of cannabis in your system, you head to the preparation room where the real magic happens. Today's task involves creating what your abbess calls spiritual enhancement aids for the upcoming religious retreat. The mushroom preparation process requires surgical precision. You're working with psilocybe species that grow wild in the damp corners of your monastery grounds, carefully cultivated in hidden garden plots that masquerade as decorative landscaping. The potency varies significantly between individual mushrooms, so you're essentially running quality control tests on medieval hallucinogens. Your testing methodology would make a modern pharmacologist proud. You prepare small samples of each batch. Test them on willing volunteers, usually novice nuns, who think they're receiving special medicine, and carefully document the effects. Too little, and the spiritual visions don't materialize. Too much, and Sister Agatha spends the next 6 hours convinced she's having direct conversations with various saints. Cannabis preparation in your monastery involves multiple varieties, each cultivated for different purposes. You have plants bred for high THC content, used in preparations designed to enhance contemplative prayer. Lower THC varieties provide hemp fiber for clothing and rope. Your most prized plants are the resin-heavy specimens that produce hashish, potent enough to transform evening vespers into transcendent experiences. The extraction and concentration processes you use are remarkably sophisticated. You create cannabis tinctures by soaking plant material in high-proof alcohol for weeks, then evaporating the liquid to concentrate the active compounds. Your hashish production involves ice water extraction techniques that won't be discovered by secular sources for centuries. The finished products are so potent that dosing requires careful measurement to avoid what you euphemistically call excessive spiritual elevation. Your herbal pharmacy extends beyond the obvious psychoactive suspects. You cultivate and process plants that produce effects ranging from mild euphoria to complete dissociation from reality. Datura provides visions so intense they're reserved for the most advanced mystical practices. Fly agaric mushrooms create experiences that some of your sisters claim involve direct communication with divine entities. Morning glory seeds produce LSD-like effects that transform ordinary prayers into cosmic journeys. The theological justification for using these substances is both elegant and convenient. Mystical experiences are considered evidence of divine favor, regardless of their chemical origins. If consuming certain plants enhances your ability to commune with God, then refusing those gifts would be ungrateful. The Church officially condemns sorcery and witchcraft, but somehow never quite gets around to defining where legitimate spiritual practice ends and supernatural manipulation begins. Your daily routine includes not just preparing these substances, but consuming them in carefully calculated doses. Morning prayers might be enhanced with a mild cannabis tincture that promotes contemplative focus. Afternoon work periods could involve stimulants derived from various plants that increase energy and concentration. Evening vespers might conclude with stronger preparations that ensure your dreams are filled with religious visions. The quality and consistency of your pharmaceutical preparations attract attention from far beyond your monastery walls. Visiting clergy specifically request accommodations at your convent because they know the spiritual refreshments will be exceptional. Wealthy nobles send donations not just to support your religious mission, but to ensure continued access to your consciousness-altering services. Your sisters develop individual specializations within the psychoactive plant operation. Sister Hildegard excels at mushroom cultivation and processing. Sister Brunhild manages the cannabis breeding program. Sister Cordula specializes in extraction and concentration techniques that maximize potency while minimizing side effects. The collective expertise of your religious community rivals that of any university medical faculty. The manuscript copying operation in your scriptorium takes on new dimensions when the scribes are working under the influence of consciousness-altering substances. The illuminated manuscripts produced by your convent feature artwork that's unusually creative, with intricate patterns and vivid colors that suggest the artists were seeing more than just a parchment in front of them. Modern art historians studying these works often comment on their mystical quality, without realizing the literal truth of that observation. Your experimental approach to consciousness alteration extends to combination preparations that blend multiple psychoactive substances. You create custom formulations for specific purposes, enhancing prayer focus, promoting mystical visions, inducing prophetic dreams, and facilitating what you call divine communion experiences. These preparations are carefully tested, documented, and refined based on feedback from your human test subjects. The economic aspects of your pharmaceutical operation create interesting moral complexities. Your preparations are expensive to produce and command premium prices from wealthy clients. You're essentially running a luxury drug business disguised as religious medicine, generating profits that fund monastery expansion and manuscript production. The contradiction between vows of poverty and pharmaceutical entrepreneurship doesn't seem to trouble anyone involved. As you finish preparing tonight's batch of consciousness enhancement aids, you sample the product to ensure quality control. The familiar warmth spreads through your system, and the stone walls of your monastery begin to seem less solid, more permeable to divine light. Tomorrow you'll wake up ready to continue your holy work of chemical consciousness exploration, secure in the knowledge that you're using God's gifts to facilitate deeper spiritual experiences, one psychedelic mushroom at a time. The poppy fields of paradise. You're walking through acres of poppies at sunrise, their delicate petals catching the morning light like stained glass windows. And you're harvesting enough raw opium to supply half of medieval Europe's pain management needs. Your white habit brushes against the flowers as you work, collecting the milky latex that seeps from scored seed pods. This isn't some clandestine drug operation. This is the official pharmaceutical ministry of your religious community, blessed by the church and funded by the faithful. The scale of your opium production would make modern drug enforcement agencies panic. Your convent maintains poppy fields stretching across several valleys, tended by dozens of nuns who understand the cultivation, harvesting and processing of opium with scientific precision that won't be matched by secular institutions for centuries. You're not just growing flowers. You're operating medieval Europe's largest legitimate pharmaceutical manufacturing facility. Your expertise in opium processing begins with understanding the complex chemistry of poppy plant development. You know exactly when the seed pods reach optimal maturity for latex production, how many times you can score each pod without damaging future yields, and the precise environmental conditions that maximize opium potency. This knowledge has been refined through generations of drug-savvy nuns who treated pharmaceutical excellence as a form of religious devotion. Let's follow you through a typical day of opium processing. After morning prayers, which, given your daily opium consumption for medicinal purposes, tend to be significantly more mystical than average, You head to the processing facility where yesterday's latex harvest awaits. Transformation into various pharmaceutical preparations. The air in this building is thick with the sweet, cloying scent of raw opium and the sharper chemical odors of various extraction processes. Your processing techniques are remarkably sophisticated. You developed methods for creating opium preparations of varying potency and purity, from raw smoking opium to concentrated tinctures that pack enough punch to knock out a warhorse. The standardization of dosages requires careful measurement and quality control testing that involves, naturally, personal sampling of each batch to ensure proper effects. The medical applications of your opium preparations extend far beyond simple pain relief. You produce specialized formulations for childbirth, surgical procedures, chronic illness management, and what your medical manuscripts euphemistically call spiritual comfort for those approaching their eternal reward. Your pharmacy supplies physicians, barber surgeons, and midwives across multiple kingdoms with opium preparations that represent the highest standard of medieval pharmaceutical technology. But here's where your operation gets particularly interesting. The line between medical use and recreational consumption becomes increasingly blurred when your daily routine involves regular opium dosing for various health concerns. Your arthritis requires morning opium. Your digestive issues need afternoon doses. Your insomnia demands evening preparations. By any reasonable standard, you're maintaining a serious opium habit. But the medieval medical framework provides perfect cover for addiction disguised as treatment. Your pharmaceutical preparations extend beyond basic opium to include complex formulations that combine the drug with other substances. You create opium wines that taste significantly better than raw preparations. Opium-infused honey provides a palatable delivery method for children and elderly patients. Smoking mixtures blend opium with various herbs to create different effects ranging from mild euphoria to complete unconsciousness. The economic implications of your opium trade are staggering. Your convent doesn't just produce drugs for local consumption. You're exporting pharmaceutical preparations across European trade routes. Merchant caravans specifically seek out your monastery because your opium preparations are known for consistent quality and reliable potency. The profits from drug sales fund everything from cathedral construction to manuscript illumination. Your daily consumption of opium creates interesting theological questions that your religious community handles with remarkable creativity. Suffering is supposed to be spiritually beneficial, but eliminating suffering with drugs seems to contradict that principle. The solution is elegant. Opium doesn't eliminate suffering. It transforms it into mystical experience. Pain becomes transcendence, addiction becomes devotion, and drug dependency becomes spiritual enlightenment. The quality control process for your opium production involves extensive testing that provides convenient justification for regular drug use. You need to verify potency levels, check for proper consistency, and ensure that each batch produces the expected effects. This professional responsibility requires daily sampling of various opium preparations, a burden you bear with appropriate religious dedication. Your sisters develop specialized roles within the opium production system. Sister Matilda manages the poppy cultivation and harvesting operation. Sister Gertrude oversees the processing and refinement procedures. Sister Adelheid handles quality control and standardization testing. Each nun brings specific expertise to the collective enterprise, creating a level of pharmaceutical sophistication that won't be seen in secular medicine for centuries. The medical manuscripts in your monastery library contain detailed information about opium use that reads like a modern pharmacology textbook. You have precise dosing guidelines for different patient populations, detailed descriptions of drug interactions with other substances, and careful documentation of side effects and contraindications. This isn't folk medicine. It's sophisticated pharmaceutical science disguised as religious healing ministry. Your opium preparations create interesting social dynamics within the broader community. Local nobles compete to secure access to your finest pharmaceutical products for their personal physicians. Wealthy merchants pay premium prices for opium preparations to take on dangerous trade journeys. Your religious community becomes a destination for people seeking relief from chronic pain, terminal illness, and the general misery of medieval existence. The theological justification for your opium production and consumption rests on several pillars of medieval Christian thought. God created poppy plants for human benefit, making their use a form of divine gift appreciation. Caring for the sick is a holy duty, regardless of the methods involved. Mystical experiences are evidence of spiritual advancement, even when chemically induced. With logic like this, opposing opium use becomes almost heretical. Your experimental approach to pharmaceutical development leads to innovations that push the boundaries of medieval medicine. You create slow-release opium preparations that provide extended pain relief. Combination formulations blend opium with other drugs to achieve specific therapeutic effects. Delivery methods range from oral tinctures to smokable preparations to what amount to medieval suppositories for patients who can't keep oral medications down. As evening approaches and you complete your daily rounds through the opium processing facility, you take your prescribed dose of evening medicine, a carefully measured portion of high quality opium tincture that will ensure peaceful sleep and pleasant dreams. Tomorrow, you'll wake up ready to continue your holy work of pharmaceutical compassion, one poppy flower at a time, secure in the knowledge that you're using God's gifts to ease human suffering, even if that gift happens to be one of history's most addicted drugs. Fermented faith and liquid prayers. You're standing in the monastery brewery at dawn, surrounded by bubbling fermentation vats that contain enough alcohol to float a medieval army, and the irony of your situation isn't lost on you. You've taken vows of temperance while operating what amounts to a medieval craft brewery that produces beer strong enough to strip paint from cathedral walls. But in the twisted logic of medieval monasticism, brewing alcohol isn't just permitted, it's practically a religious obligation. Your brewing operation makes modern craft breweries look like amateur hour. You're producing dozens of different beer varieties, each with specific alcohol content ranging from mildly intoxicating to liquid courage that could fuel a crusade. Your knowledge of fermentation science, grain selection, and flavor enhancement techniques won't be formally documented by secular sources for centuries. Yet you're applying these principles with precision that would make modern brewmasters weep with envy. The scale of alcohol consumption in your religious community would trigger intervention. Procedures in any modern treatment facility. Your daily routine includes beer with breakfast, wine with lunch, and stronger preparations with dinner. Evening prayers often conclude with what you call contemplative refreshments, aged spirits that pack enough alcoholic punch to transform ordinary hymns into transcendent experiences. Let's examine the theological gymnastics that justify your alcohol production empire. Jesus turned water into wine, making viticulture a holy profession. The Eucharist requires wine, making alcohol consumption a sacramental act. Monks and nuns have always brewed beer for safety reasons, making intoxication a form of disease prevention. With reasoning like this, sobriety becomes almost suspicious. Why would anyone refuse God's gifts? Your brewing process begins with grain selection that requires genuine agricultural expertise. You maintain relationships with farmers across multiple regions, purchasing barley, wheat, and oats based on specific characteristics that will produce desired alcohol content and flavor profiles. Your grain storage facilities are more sophisticated than most secular operations, with climate control systems that prevent spoilage and optimize fermentation potential. The fermentation management in your brewery involves techniques that won't be discovered by commercial brewers for generations. You understand the relationship between yeast strains, temperature control, and alcohol production. Your fermentation vessels are carefully maintained and monitored to achieve consistent results. You've developed methods for creating high-alcohol beers that remain palatable, a technical achievement that requires genuine scientific understanding. Your beer production includes specialty varieties that push the boundaries of what medieval brewing could achieve. You create beers infused with psychoactive herbs that add consciousness-altering properties to the intoxicating effects. Medicinal beers contain plant extracts that serve therapeutic purposes while delivering substantial alcohol content. Seasonal varieties incorporate ingredients that produce different types of intoxication depending on the liturgical calendar. The quality control process for your brewing operation provides perfect justification for extensive alcohol consumption. You need to taste each batch to verify proper fermentation, check for consistent flavor profiles, and ensure that alcohol content meets specifications. This professional responsibility requires sampling multiple beers throughout the day, a burden you bear with appropriate religious dedication and increasing unsteadiness. Your sisters develop specialized expertise within the brewing operation that reflects genuine professional competence. Sister Kunigund manages the grain procurement and storage systems. Sister Walburga oversees the fermentation and quality control processes. Sister Notburga handles the aging and flavoring procedures that transform basic beer into premium alcoholic beverages. The collective knowledge of your religious community rivals that of any commercial brewery. The economic aspects of your alcohol production create interesting contradictions with your vows of poverty. Your brewery generates enormous profits from sales to local taverns, traveling merchants, and noble households. The money funds monastery expansion, manuscript production, and various charitable activities. You're essentially running a commercial alcohol business disguised as religious ministry, and business is remarkably good. Your daily alcohol consumption follows a carefully structured schedule that maintains optimal intoxication levels throughout your religious duties. Morning beer provides gentle stimulation for dawn prayers. Midday wine offers social lubrication for community meals. Evening spirits create the perfect mindset for contemplative prayer and mystical experiences. By conservative estimates, you're consuming enough alcohol to maintain a blood alcohol level that would be illegal for driving in any modern jurisdiction. The social implications of your brewing expertise extend far beyond your monastery walls. Visiting clergy specifically request accommodations at your convent because they know the refreshments will be exceptional. Noble families send their daughters to your religious community, partly because they want access to your premium alcoholic beverages. Your monastery becomes a destination for anyone seeking high-quality intoxication disguised as spiritual enlightenment. Your experimental approach to alcohol production leads to innovations that push the boundaries of medieval brewing technology. You create distilled spirits with alcohol content exceeding 40%, using techniques that won't be formally documented for centuries. Aged varieties spend years in wooden barrels that impart complex flavors while increasing potency. Blended preparations combine different alcoholic beverages to achieve specific intoxicating effects. The manuscript copying operation in your scriptorium takes on interesting dimensions when the scribes are maintaining steady alcohol consumption throughout their workday. The illuminated manuscripts produced by your convent feature unusually creative artwork and occasionally questionable spelling that suggests the artists and writers were seeing more than just the parchment in front of them. Modern scholars studying these works often comment on their inspired quality, without realizing the literal truth of that observation. Your alcohol preparations cross the line from beverage into medicine with formulations that serve specific therapeutic purposes. You produce wine-based tinctures infused with medicinal herbs. Beer preparations contain plant extracts that address various health concerns. Distilled spirits serve as antiseptics, anesthetics, and general cure-alls for everything from toothache to existential despair. The theological framework surrounding your alcohol consumption becomes increasingly creative as tolerance levels rise and dependency deepens. Intoxication enhances spiritual receptivity. Alcohol consumption demonstrates gratitude for God's botanical generosity. Brewing excellence glorifies divine creation. Sharing alcoholic beverages builds religious community. With logic like this, sobriety becomes not just unnecessary, but potentially impious. Your quality standards for alcoholic beverages attract attention from sophisticated consumers across medieval Europe. Merchants alter trade routes to pass through your region, specifically to acquire your premium products. Noble households compete to secure exclusive access to your finest vintages and specialty brews. Your religious community becomes synonymous with alcoholic excellence, a reputation that generates both profit and paradox. As you conclude your evening rounds through the brewery, checking fermentation progress and sampling products for quality assurance, you reflect on the unique position you occupy in medieval society. You're a bride of Christ who spends her days perfecting the art of intoxication. You've taken vows of simplicity while producing luxury beverages that grace the tables of kings. But in the medieval mindset, there's no contradiction. You're using God's gifts to create liquid joy. And if that joy happens to be highly alcoholic, well, that's just evidence of divine generosity and your own professional competence in the sacred art of fermentation. The sacred smoke and heavenly highs. You're sitting in the monastery garden at twilight, inhaling deeply from a pipe filled with what your abbess calls contemplative herbs. And the smoke that fills your lungs contains enough cannabis to make a Rastafarian jealous. The irony of your situation is perfect. You're a holy woman getting progressively higher while reciting evening prayers. And the church not only approves, but actively encourages this practice as legitimate spiritual enhancement. Your cannabis cultivation operation would make modern agricultural experts impressed and law enforcement officials apoplectic. You maintain multiple garden plots throughout the monastery grounds, growing different varieties of cannabis for specific purposes. High THC strains for mystical experiences, hemp varieties for fiber production, and specialty plants bred for maximum resin production. Your knowledge of selective breeding, cultivation techniques, and harvesting optimization represents centuries of accumulated expertise passed down through generations of botanically sophisticated nuns. The processing of your cannabis harvest involves techniques that wouldn't look out of place in a modern dispensary. You dry the plant material under carefully controlled conditions to preserve potency. You create hashish using ice water extraction methods that concentrate the psychoactive compounds. You produce tinctures by soaking cannabis in high-proof alcohol, creating preparations so potent that dosing requires careful measurement to avoid what you euphemistically call excessive spiritual elevation. Let's examine your daily routine of consciousness enhancement disguised as religious devotion. Morning prayers begin with a mild cannabis preparation that promotes contemplative focus without interfering with your ability to perform necessary tasks. Midday meditation involves stronger doses that transform ordinary spiritual exercises into transcendent experiences. Evening vespers conclude with premium smoking blends that ensure your dreams are filled with religious visions that may or may not be chemically induced. Your smoking implements are as sophisticated as your cannabis preparations. You use pipes carved from special woods that enhance the flavor and effects of your herbal mixtures. Water pipes provide smoother consumption of your stronger preparations. Incense burners allow for group consumption during special religious ceremonies, creating communal experiences that build spiritual community while getting everyone thoroughly stoned. The theological justification for your cannabis consumption rests on several pillars of medieval Christian thought that demonstrate remarkable creativity in biblical interpretation. The burning bush that spoke to Moses obviously contains psychoactive substances. The anointing oil described in Exodus included cannabis among its ingredients. God created all plants for human benefit, making their use a form of divine gift appreciation. Mystical experiences are evidence of spiritual advancement, regardless of their chemical origins. Your cannabis preparations extend beyond simple smoking materials. to include edible preparations that provide different types of intoxication. You create cannabis-infused honey that provides long-lasting effects perfect for extended prayer sessions. Cannabis wines combine the euphoric effects of alcohol with the consciousness-altering properties of THC. Baked goods incorporate cannabis butter that makes even the most mundane monastery meals into consciousness-expanding experiences. The medical applications of your cannabis preparations cover a wide range of conditions that conveniently include most of the common complaints experienced by medieval religious communities. Chronic pain from hours of kneeling in prayer requires cannabis treatment. Digestive issues from poor monastery food benefit from THC therapy. Insomnia caused by uncomfortable living conditions responds well to indica-dominant preparations. Depression resulting from social isolation improves with regular cannabis consumption. Your sisters develop individual specializations within the cannabis cultivation and processing operation. Sister Mechthild excels at plant breeding and cultivation techniques. Sister Hedwig manages the drying and curing processes that preserve potency. Sister Kunigunde specializes in extraction and concentration methods that maximize the psychoactive effects. The collective expertise of your religious community creates a level of cannabis sophistication that won't be seen in secular society for centuries. The quality control process for your cannabis production involves extensive testing that provides perfect justification for regular consumption. You need to verify potency levels, check for proper curing, and ensure that each batch produces the expected consciousness-altering effects. This professional responsibility requires daily sampling of various cannabis preparations, a burden you bear with appropriate religious dedication and increasing red-eye devotion. Your cannabis operation creates interesting economic dynamics within the broader medieval community. Wealthy nobles compete to secure access to your finest preparations for their personal physicians and private spiritual advisors. Traveling merchants pay premium prices for portable cannabis products to ease the discomforts of long journeys. Your religious community becomes a destination for people seeking relief from various ailments that conveniently respond well to cannabis treatment. The experimental approach to cannabis preparation in your monastery leads to innovations that push the boundaries of medieval pharmaceutical technology. You create slow-release edible preparations that provide extended consciousness alteration. Combination formulations blend cannabis with other psychoactive substances to achieve specific spiritual effects. Delivery methods range from traditional smoking to what amount to medieval vaporization techniques that reduce the harshness of consumption. Your manuscript copying operation takes on new dimensions. When the scribes are working under the influence of consciousness-altering cannabis preparations, the illuminated manuscripts produced by your convent feature artwork that's unusually creative and intricate, with flowing patterns and vivid imagery that suggest the artists were seeing significantly more than just the parchment in front of them. Modern art historians studying these works often comment on their mystical inspiration, without realizing the chemical source of that inspiration. The social aspects of cannabis consumption within your religious community create bonds that extend beyond normal sisterly relationships. Sharing pipes during evening prayers builds intimacy and trust among your fellow nuns. Group consumption during special ceremonies creates shared experiences that strengthen community solidarity. The collective altered consciousness during religious services transforms ordinary liturgy into profound spiritual journeys that participants remember for decades. Your theological framework for cannabis consumption becomes increasingly sophisticated as tolerance levels rise and psychological dependency deepens. Cannabis enhances spiritual receptivity by altering normal consciousness patterns. Regular consumption demonstrates faith in God's botanical wisdom. Sharing cannabis preparations builds religious community through shared transcendent experiences. Cultivation excellence glorifies divine creation by maximizing the potential of sacred plants. The storage and preservation of your cannabis products requires specialized knowledge and facilities. You maintain climate-controlled areas that prevent degradation of psychoactive compounds. Your storage systems organize products by potency, strain characteristics, and intended spiritual applications. The inventory management system ensures consistent supply for daily consumption, while maintaining reserves for special religious occasions and visiting clergy. As you finish your evening cannabis consumption and prepare for sleep, you reflect on the unique balance you've achieved between religious devotion and pharmaceutical enthusiasm. Tomorrow, you'll wake up ready to continue your holy work of consciousness exploration through botanical gifts, secure in the knowledge that you're using God's plants to facilitate deeper spiritual experiences, one sacred smoke session at a time. The fact that this spiritual practice happens to involve getting spectacularly high is just evidence of divine generosity in providing multiple paths to transcendence. The monastery medicine cabinet of madness. You're unlocking the pharmacy cabinet at midnight, and the contents would make a modern de-agent faint dead away. Rows of carefully labeled bottles contain enough morphine, cocaine, LSD precursors, and various other consciousness-altering substances to supply a small army with chemical enlightenment. But you're not running a drug cartel. You're managing medieval Europe's most sophisticated pharmaceutical operation, where the line between medicine and recreational chemistry disappeared centuries ago. Your pharmaceutical knowledge encompasses substances that won't be discovered by secular science for hundreds of years. You understand the chemistry of plant alkaloids, the pharmacology of various psychoactive compounds, and the precise dosing required to achieve specific consciousness-altering effects. This expertise has been accumulated through generations of chemically curious nuns who treated pharmaceutical experimentation as a form of religious devotion. The inventory in your medicine cabinet reads like a medieval pharmacopoeia written by someone with serious substance abuse issues. Ergot-derived preparations provide LSD-like experiences that some of your sisters claim facilitate direct communication with saints. Belladonna extracts produce dissociative states that transform prayer into otherworldly journeys. Mandrake root preparations serve as powerful anesthetics that also happen to induce vivid hallucinations. Let's examine your daily routine of pharmaceutical administration disguised as medical treatment. Morning medicine includes stimulants derived from various plants that provide energy for dawn prayers while producing mild euphoria. Afternoon treatments involve pain relievers that happen to contain enough opiates to maintain a steady state of chemical bliss. Evening remedies combine sedatives with hallucinogens to ensure your dreams are filled with religious visions. Your preparation techniques for pharmaceutical compounds demonstrate remarkable sophistication. You create concentrated extracts using distillation methods that maximize potency while minimizing side effects. Your standardization procedures ensure consistent dosing across different batches. Quality control testing involves personal sampling of each preparation to verify proper effects, a professional responsibility that conveniently justifies extensive drug consumption. The medical applications of your pharmaceutical arsenal cover every conceivable health condition that might affect a medieval religious community. Chronic pain from prolonged kneeling requires opiate medications. Digestive issues from poor food need stimulant treatments. Respiratory problems from damp living conditions benefit from various plant-based preparations. Depression caused by social isolation responds well to consciousness-altering therapies. Your sisters develop specialized expertise within the pharmaceutical operation that reflects genuine scientific competence. Sister Adelheid manages the plant cultivation and harvesting procedures. Sister Kunigunda oversees the extraction and purification processes. Sister Walburga handles the dosing and quality control testing. The collective knowledge of your religious community rivals that of any university medical faculty. The theological justification for your pharmaceutical consumption rests on creative interpretation of Christian doctrine that would impress modern theologians. God created all plants for human benefit. making their use a form of divine gift appreciation. Healing the sick is a holy duty, regardless of the methods involved. Mystical experiences are evidence of spiritual advancement, even when chemically induced. Suffering is spiritually beneficial, but eliminating suffering with drugs somehow transforms it into transcendent experience. Your experimental approach to pharmaceutical development leads to innovations that push the boundaries of medieval medicine. You create combination preparations that blend multiple psychoactive substances to achieve specific effects. Slow-release formulations provide extended consciousness alteration perfect for lengthy prayer sessions. Delivery methods range from oral tinctures to smokable preparations to what amount to medieval suppositories for patients who can't keep oral medications down. The economic implications of your pharmaceutical operation create interesting contradictions with your vows of poverty. Your preparations command premium prices from wealthy clients who seek relief from various ailments. The profits fund monastery expansion, manuscript production, and pharmaceutical research. You're essentially running a luxury drug business disguised as religious medicine, generating income that supports your community's spiritual mission. Your quality control procedures involve extensive testing that provides perfect justification for regular drug consumption. You need to verify potency levels, check for proper preparation consistency, and ensure that each batch produces the expected consciousness-altering effects. This professional responsibility requires daily sampling of various pharmaceutical preparations, a burden you bear with appropriate religious dedication and increasing chemical dependency. The storage and preservation of your pharmaceutical inventory requires specialized knowledge and facilities. You maintain climate-controlled areas that prevent degradation of active compounds. Your labeling system organizes products by potency, therapeutic application, and recreational potential. The security measures protect valuable preparations from theft while ensuring easy access for legitimate medical and spiritual applications. Your pharmaceutical preparations cross the line from medicine into what modern society would classify as recreational drugs with formulations that serve no legitimate therapeutic purpose beyond producing altered states of consciousness. You create preparations specifically designed to enhance mystical experiences during prayer. Specialty formulations provide different types of consciousness alteration depending on the liturgical calendar. Experimental combinations explore the boundaries of what human consciousness can experience through chemical manipulation. The manuscript documentation of your pharmaceutical knowledge creates a library of drug information that won't be matched by secular sources for centuries. Your recipe books detail precise preparation methods for dozens of psychoactive substances. Medical texts describe dosing guidelines, side effects, and therapeutic applications. Research notes document experimental results from testing various consciousness-altering preparations on willing volunteers. Your daily pharmaceutical consumption follows a carefully structured schedule that maintains optimal consciousness alteration throughout your religious duties. Morning stimulants provide energy and focus for dawn prayers. Midday analgesics ensure comfort during lengthy work periods. Evening sedatives combined with hallucinogens create the perfect mindset for contemplative prayer and mystical experiences. By any reasonable standard, you're maintaining serious addiction to multiple substances simultaneously. The social dynamics of pharmaceutical consumption within your religious community create bonds that extend beyond normal sisterly relationships. Sharing drug experiences during group prayer sessions builds intimacy and trust among your fellow nuns. Collective consciousness alteration during religious ceremonies creates shared transcendent experiences that strengthen community solidarity. The mutual dependency on various substances creates a support network that enables continued addiction disguised as spiritual practice. Your pharmaceutical operation attracts attention from sophisticated consumers across medieval Europe. Visiting clergy specifically request accommodations at your convent. because they know the medical treatments will be exceptionally effective. Wealthy nobles send donations not just to support your religious mission, but to ensure continued access to your consciousness-altering services. Your monastery becomes a destination for people seeking chemical solutions to the challenges of medieval existence. As you complete your midnight rounds through the pharmacy, sampling various preparations for quality control purposes and ensuring your own optimal chemical balance for tomorrow's spiritual duties, you reflect on the remarkable synthesis you've achieved between religious devotion and pharmaceutical expertise. You're using God's botanical gifts to explore the boundaries of human consciousness, one carefully measured dose at a time, secure in the knowledge that your chemical journey toward enlightenment is both professionally competent and spiritually justified. The Sisterhood of Substances and Sacred Addiction. You're conducting the morning meeting of what you call the Spiritual Enhancement Committee, but what would more accurately be described as a medieval support group for religiously justified drug addicts. The 12 nuns seated around the stone table represent the core leadership of your monastery's pharmaceutical operations. And between them, they consume enough consciousness-altering substances daily to supply a modern music festival with chemical entertainment. Your religious community has evolved into something unprecedented in medieval society. A fully functional institution operated entirely by individuals maintaining serious addictions to multiple substances simultaneously. The remarkable aspect isn't that you're all dependent on various drugs. It's that you've created theological, economic, and social frameworks that not only justify this dependency, but celebrate it as evidence of spiritual advancement. The daily routine of substance consumption in your monastery follows a schedule so precisely calibrated that modern addiction specialists would be simultaneously impressed and horrified. Each sister has her own pharmaceutical regimen designed to maintain optimal consciousness alteration throughout the day. Morning prayers begin with stimulant preparations that provide energy and focus. Midday work periods involve pain relievers that happen to produce euphoric side effects. Evening vespers conclude with combinations of sedatives and hallucinogens that ensure mystical experiences during prayer. Let's examine the psychological mechanisms that allow your religious community to maintain collective denial about the nature of your substance use. Everything you consume is classified as medicine, regardless of its actual therapeutic value. Consciousness alteration is reframed as spiritual enhancement rather than intoxication. Physical dependency is described as devotional consistency instead of addiction. Withdrawal symptoms become spiritual purification experiences that demonstrate religious dedication. Your sisterhood has developed a sophisticated support network that enables continued substance use while maintaining the appearance of religious propriety. When Sister Adelheid experiences opium withdrawal, it's collectively interpreted as a spiritual trial that requires increased prayer and community support. When Sister Kunigun's cannabis consumption reaches levels that interfere with basic functioning, her condition is diagnosed as excessive mystical receptivity that needs careful management rather than treatment. The leadership structure of your monastery reflects the realities of managing a community where everyone is operating under the influence of various consciousness-altering substances. Decision-making processes are deliberately slowed to accommodate impaired judgment. Work assignments are designed around the predictable effects of different pharmaceutical regimens. Social interactions are carefully managed to prevent conflicts that might arise from drug-induced personality changes. Your pharmaceutical rotation system ensures that different sisters maintain sobriety levels sufficient to handle essential monastery functions. While most of the community enjoys recreational chemical consciousness throughout the day, designated individuals maintain minimal substance use to manage financial affairs, diplomatic relations, and crisis situations. This system creates a functional hierarchy based on relative sobriety rather than traditional religious authority. The economic management of your substance-dependent community requires remarkable financial sophistication. Your pharmaceutical operations generate enormous profits, but they also consume significant resources through raw material purchases, production costs, and the overhead expenses of maintaining a community where everyone requires daily chemical maintenance. The accounting systems track both income and consumption with precision that would impress modern business administrators. Your quality control procedures for pharmaceutical preparations involve testing protocols that would be considered unethical by any modern research standards. New substance preparations are tested on volunteers who think they're receiving experimental spiritual enhancement medicine. Dosage optimization involves systematic administration of varying concentrations until desired consciousness-altering effects are achieved. Side effect documentation includes careful observation of behavioral changes, religious experiences, and physical reactions. The theological framework supporting your collective substance use has evolved into a sophisticated system of religious justification that addresses every possible objection to drug consumption. Physical dependency demonstrates faith in God's botanical gifts. Tolerance development proves spiritual advancement through increased receptivity to divine substances. Withdrawal symptoms indicate the need for deeper religious commitment. Overdose experiences become opportunities for direct communication with heavenly entities. Your experimental approach to consciousness alteration extends to research programs that explore the boundaries of what human awareness can experience through chemical manipulation. You conduct systematic investigations into combination drug effects, timing optimization for maximum spiritual benefit, and delivery method innovations that enhance both potency and religious significance. This research is documented in manuscripts that serve as medieval pharmacological textbooks, disguised as spiritual guidance literature. The social dynamics within your substance-dependent religious community create bonds that extend far beyond normal sisterly relationships. Shared drug experiences during prayer sessions build intimacy and trust that transcends typical monastic connections. Collective consciousness alteration during religious ceremonies creates communal transcendent experiences that participants describe as the closest thing to heaven achievable in mortal life. The mutual dependency on various substances creates support networks that enable continued addiction while maintaining community function. Your manuscript production operation takes on surreal dimensions when the scribes and illuminators are maintaining steady consciousness alteration throughout their work periods. The texts produced by your scriptorium feature unusually creative content, innovative theological interpretations, and artwork that suggests the creators were experiencing significantly enhanced perception during the creation process. Modern scholars studying these works often comment on their inspired mystical quality, without recognizing the chemical source of that inspiration. The recruitment and training programs for new sisters involve gradual introduction to your community's pharmaceutical culture. Novices begin with mild preparations during religious instruction. Progressive initiation involves exposure to stronger substances as they demonstrate commitment to your spiritual practices. Full integration into the community requires acceptance of daily chemical consumption as a normal aspect of religious life. Your relationships with secular authorities require careful management to maintain your community's autonomy while avoiding unwanted attention to your pharmaceutical activities. Local nobles who benefit from your medical services are discouraged from investigating your production methods too closely. Church officials who visit your monastery are provided with hospitality that includes generous sampling of your consciousness-altering preparations, ensuring their continued support for your spiritual mission. The long-term sustainability of your substance-dependent community depends on maintaining the delicate balance between chemical consumption and functional productivity. Your agricultural operations must generate sufficient income to fund both basic living expenses and pharmaceutical raw materials. Your manuscript production must continue at levels that justify your scholarly reputation. Your medical services must remain effective enough to attract paying clients. despite being administered by practitioners who are consistently under the influence of various drugs. Your daily individual pharmaceutical regimen would horrify modern addiction counselors, but represents careful self-medication designed to maintain optimal functionality within your community environment. Morning stimulants provide energy for dawn prayers and early morning work. Midday analgesics ensure comfort during lengthy manual labor periods. Afternoon mood enhancers maintain positive social interactions during community activities. Evening combinations of sedatives and hallucinogens create the perfect mindset. FOR contemplative prayer and mystical experiences. As you conclude your morning pharmaceutical planning session and begin distribution of the day's chemical supplies to your sister addicts, you reflect on the remarkable achievement your community represents. You've created a sustainable society where serious substance dependency is not only accepted, but celebrated as spiritual advancement. You've developed economic systems that generate sufficient wealth to fund both basic needs and extensive drug consumption. Most importantly, you've maintained the theological frameworks that transform addiction into devotion, dependency into dedication, and chemical consciousness alteration into religious transcendence. The final revelation, holy intoxication and divine dependency. You're standing in the monastery chapel at dawn, surrounded by sisters whose morning prayers are enhanced by a carefully calibrated cocktail of consciousness-altering substances. And the irony of your situation represents the perfect culmination of medieval religious hypocrisy. You've spent decades building a spiritual community that operates on the principle that chemical dependency is not just acceptable, but essential for achieving true religious enlightenment. The chapel fills with incense that contains psychoactive additives, creating a communal high that transforms ordinary worship into transcendent experience. Your monastery has achieved something unprecedented in the history of organized religion, a fully functional spiritual community where addiction is reframed as devotion, chemical dependency is celebrated as divine connection, and substance abuse is institutionalized as sacramental practice. The remarkable aspect isn't that medieval nuns used drugs and alcohol. It's that you created comprehensive theological, economic, and social systems that transformed substance abuse into spiritual virtue. The morning ritual you're participating in represents the culmination of centuries of pharmaceutical innovation disguised as religious practice. Each sister consumes her personalized combination of consciousness-altering substances designed to optimize her spiritual receptivity for the day's religious activities. The preparations include opium for pain management, cannabis for contemplative enhancement, alcohol for social lubrication, and various psychoactive plants for mystical experience facilitation. Let's examine the remarkable achievement your community represents in terms of sustainable addiction management. You've created economic systems that generate sufficient wealth to fund extensive pharmaceutical operations while maintaining the appearance of religious poverty. Your agricultural and manuscript production enterprises provide legitimate income sources that support both basic living expenses and substantial drug procurement costs. The profits from your pharmaceutical sales to external clients create a virtuous cycle that enables continued substance consumption while expanding your influence. Your theological framework for justifying extensive substance use has evolved into a sophisticated system of religious rationalization that addresses every possible objection to drug consumption. Physical dependency demonstrates unwavering faith in God's botanical gifts. Tolerance development proves spiritual advancement through increased capacity for divine substances. Withdrawal symptoms indicate the soul's hunger for sacred chemicals. Overdose experiences provide opportunities for direct communication with heavenly entities. With logic like this, sobriety becomes not just unnecessary, but potentially impious. The daily routine of your substance-dependent religious community follows patterns that maintain optimal consciousness, alteration throughout each sister's spiritual duties. Morning stimulants provide energy and focus for dawn prayers while producing mild euphoria that enhances religious devotion. Midday analgesics ensure physical comfort during lengthy work periods, while generating chemical bliss that transforms manual labor into meditative practice. Evening combinations of sedatives and hallucinogens create perfect conditions for contemplative prayer and mystical experiences the participants describe as direct divine communication. Your quality control procedures for pharmaceutical preparations involve testing protocols that ensure consistent consciousness-altering effects across different batches. This professional responsibility requires extensive personal sampling of various drug preparations, creating a feedback loop where quality assurance becomes indistinguishable from recreational consumption. The collective expertise of your sisters in evaluating psychoactive substances rivals that of any modern pharmaceutical research facility. The social dynamics within your community create bonds that transcend typical religious relationships through shared chemical experiences that build extraordinary intimacy and trust. Collective consciousness alteration during group prayer sessions creates communion that participants describe as closer than blood relationships. The mutual dependency on various substances generates support networks that enable continued addiction while maintaining community functionality. When withdrawal symptoms occur, they're collectively interpreted as spiritual trials requiring increased community support rather than medical intervention. Your manuscript production operation, under the influence of consciousness-altering substances, has created some of medieval Europe's most innovative religious literature. The texts produced by your scriptorium feature theological interpretations, mystical insights, and artistic innovations that reflect the enhanced perception and creative thinking generated by regular drug consumption. Modern scholars studying these works often comment on their inspired visionary quality, without recognizing that the inspiration was chemically induced. The recruitment and retention strategies for your community involve gradual integration of new members into your pharmaceutical culture. Novices are introduced to mild consciousness-altering substances during religious instruction, with progression to stronger preparations as they demonstrate commitment to your spiritual practices. The process creates psychological and physical dependency that ensures long-term community membership while maintaining the appearance of voluntary religious dedication. Your relationships with external authorities require careful management to protect your community's pharmaceutical operations from unwanted scrutiny. Local nobles who benefit from your medical services are diplomatically discouraged from investigating your production methods too closely. Church officials who visit your monastery receive generous hospitality that includes sampling of your consciousness-altering preparations, ensuring their continued support for your spiritual mission through first-hand experience of your pharmaceutical hospitality. The experimental research programs in your community explore the boundaries of consciousness alteration through systematic investigation of combination drug effects, dosage optimization for spiritual benefit, and delivery method innovations that enhance both potency and religious significance. Your research methodology involves human testing on willing volunteers who believe they're participating in advanced spiritual practices rather than pharmaceutical experimentation. Your individual daily pharmaceutical regimen represents decades of personal experimentation, designed to maintain optimal functionality while maximizing consciousness-altering benefits. The morning combination provides energy and focus for essential tasks, while generating mild euphoria that enhances religious devotion. Midday preparations ensure physical comfort and social lubrication during community activities. Evening formulations create ideal conditions for contemplative prayer and mystical experiences that justify continued pharmaceutical consumption as spiritual practice. The long-term sustainability of your substance-dependent community depends on maintaining the delicate balance between chemical consumption and practical productivity. Your economic enterprises must generate sufficient income to fund both basic living expenses and extensive pharmaceutical operations. Your religious reputation must remain intact to attract new members and maintain external support. Your pharmaceutical expertise must continue advancing to ensure product quality and effectiveness. Your legacy extends far beyond your individual monastery to influence broader medieval religious culture through the normalization of consciousness-altering substance use within Christian spiritual practice. The theological frameworks you've developed provide justification for pharmaceutical consumption that will influence religious thought for generations. Your economic models demonstrate the financial viability of substance-dependent communities. Your social systems prove that addiction can be successfully institutionalized within functional organizations. The historical significance of your community lies not in the simple fact that medieval nuns used drugs and alcohol, but in the sophisticated systems you created to transform substance abuse into spiritual virtue. You developed theological justifications that made addiction into devotion. You created economic structures that made dependency financially sustainable. You established social frameworks that made chemical consciousness alteration into religious practice. As you complete your morning pharmaceutical preparations and begin the day's religious activities with optimal consciousness enhancement, you reflect on the remarkable achievement your community represents in the history of human civilization. You've successfully created a society where serious substance dependency is not only accepted, but celebrated as evidence of spiritual advancement. You've developed comprehensive systems that enable extensive drug consumption, while maintaining functional productivity and religious respectability. The morning light streaming through the chapel windows illuminates your sisters as they conclude their chemically enhanced prayers, each one maintaining carefully calibrated levels of consciousness alteration that transform ordinary worship into transcendent experience. You've achieved something that modern society still struggles to accomplish: the complete integration of pharmaceutical consciousness enhancement with spiritual practice, creating a community where addiction becomes devotion, dependency becomes dedication, and chemical intoxication becomes divine connection. Your final reflection acknowledges the profound paradox you've embodied throughout your religious life. You've used God's botanical gifts to achieve spiritual transcendence through chemical means, creating a form of devotion that depends entirely on substance consumption for its effectiveness. Whether this represents authentic religious experience or elaborate self-deception becomes irrelevant when the results generate genuine community, productive economic activity, and sustainable social organization. You've proven that with sufficient theological creativity, economic sophistication, and social innovation, even serious addiction can be transformed into sacred practice, one carefully measured dose at a time.